The courtroom was cold, carved from the gray stone that made up most of Kareth Prime's architecture. Zara stood in the center, her scaled hands bound by energy shackles that hummed with a low, threatening sound. Her reptilian eyes, usually bright gold, had dulled to a muddy yellow. She knew what was coming. Judge Vex sat high above everyone else, his 4 arms folded across his chest. The Carethians valued order above all else, and their justice system reflected that. No mercy, no exceptions, only the law. "Zara of the 3rd District," Judge Vex's voice echoed through the chamber. "You have been found guilty of debt default. The amount owed is 1 credit." A murmur ran through the sparse audience. Even here, where harsh sentences were common, condemning someone over a single credit seemed extreme. But the law was the law. Marcus Chen sat in the back row, the only human in the courtroom. He'd been on Kareth Prime for 3 months, working as a mining equipment technician. He'd seen enough of their justice system to know it was broken, but this was beyond anything he'd witnessed before. "The sentence," Judge Vex continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "is 20 years of hard labor in the depths." Zara's legs buckled. The depths. Everyone knew what that meant. The deepest mines on Kareth Prime, where the air was thin and toxic, where cave-ins happened weekly, where prisoners rarely survived their first year, let alone 20. Marcus stood up before he could stop himself. "Your Honor, surely there must be some mistake. 1 credit? That's worth less than a meal." Every head in the courtroom turned to stare at him. Humans were tolerated on Kareth Prime because of their technical skills, but they had no voice in legal matters. Judge Vex's compound eyes focused on Marcus. "The human will remain silent or be removed." "But this is insane," Marcus couldn't help himself. "You're sending her to die over pocket change." 2 guards moved toward him, their shock batons crackling to life. Marcus sat down, his fists clenched. He watched as they dragged Zara away, her tail leaving marks in the dust on the floor. The courtroom emptied quickly. Carethians didn't linger after justice was served. Marcus remained seated, his mind racing. He'd seen injustice before, but this was different. This was a death sentence over nothing. He made his way to the records hall, a massive building that housed all of Kareth Prime's legal documents. The clerk, a thin Carethian with pale scales, looked up as he approached. "I need to see the file on Zara of the 3rd District," Marcus said. "Humans have no authority to access legal records." Marcus pulled out his work credentials. "I'm not here as a human. I'm here as an employee of Stellar Mining Corporation. She was one of our contractors. I need to file a report." It was a lie, but the clerk didn't know that. After some grumbling, he produced a data tablet. Marcus scanned through Zara's file. She was young by Carethian standards, only 40 cycles old. She'd worked various jobs, always paying her debts on time. Then he found it. 3 months ago, she'd taken a loan of 100 credits to pay for medicine. Her clutch sister was dying from scale rot, a disease that was treatable but expensive. She'd paid back 99 credits. The final credit was due yesterday. The file showed she'd tried to pay it this morning, but the courts had already processed her default. The system was automated, merciless, and absolute. Marcus left the records hall with a sick feeling in his stomach. He'd been on many worlds, seen many different societies, but the Carethians' obsession with their credit system was uniquely cruel. Your worth was literally measured in credits. Default on even the smallest debt, and you became property of the state. He returned to his quarters in the human sector of the city. His roommate, David, was cooking something that smelled like curry. "You look like hell," David said. Marcus told him about the trial, about Zara, and the 1 credit. David stopped stirring the pot. "That's messed up, even for this place," David said. "But what can you do? You start interfering with their justice system and we'll all be on the next transport off-world. Or worse." Marcus knew David was right. Humans had a decent arrangement on Kareth Prime. Good pay, safe quarters, and mostly left alone as long as they did their jobs and didn't cause trouble. Getting involved in a legal matter was definitely causing trouble, but he couldn't get Zara's face out of his mind. The way her scales had gone pale when they mentioned the depths. The drag marks her tail left on the floor. That night, Marcus accessed the mining company's database. He had high-level clearance because of his job, and he used it to pull up information on the depths. What he found made his stomach turn. The depths were a series of interconnected mines that went down almost 2 kilometers. The lowest levels were used for prison labor. The temperature down there reached dangerous levels. The air recycling systems were minimal. Prisoners worked 18-hour shifts, mining rare minerals that were too dangerous for machines to extract. The mortality rate was 93% in the first year. Marcus closed the files and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Earth, about how humans had spent centuries learning that justice without mercy wasn't justice at all. How many people had died in debtors' prisons before humanity figured that out? The next morning, Marcus reported to work as usual. The mining facility was a massive complex on the outskirts of the city. Most of the operation was automated, but someone had to maintain the equipment, and humans had proven particularly good at keeping machines running in harsh conditions. His supervisor, a Carethian named Drex, was waiting for him. "Chen, I need you to go to Processing Station 7. Equipment malfunction." Marcus nodded and gathered his tools. Processing Station 7 was where they sorted prisoners before sending them to their assigned work areas. His stomach tightened. Zara would probably go through there. The station was chaos when he arrived. Hundreds of prisoners in gray jumpsuits were being sorted into groups. Guards with shock batons kept them in line. Marcus tried not to look at their faces as he worked on the sorting machine. Then he saw her. Zara was in a line of prisoners headed for the transport that would take them to the depths. Her scales had lost all their shine. The gray jumpsuit hung loose on her frame. Marcus forced himself to focus on the machine. He found the problem quickly: a burnt-out circuit board. As he replaced it, his mind worked on a different problem. How could he help her? The transport schedule was posted on the wall. The depths transport left in 3 hours. After that, Zara would be beyond anyone's reach. An idea began to form. It was dangerous, probably stupid, and would definitely cost him his job if he was caught. But the alternative was letting an innocent person die over 1 credit. Marcus finished the repair and returned to the main facility. He went to his workstation and pulled up the prisoner transport manifests. His clearance gave him read-only access, but he'd learned a few tricks during his time on Kareth Prime. The Carethian system was advanced but rigid. It followed protocols absolutely, which made it predictable. Marcus found a back door he'd discovered months ago while debugging a system error. He'd never used it for anything serious, but now. He accessed the transport manifest for the depths. 53 prisoners were scheduled for transfer. Zara was number 37. Marcus studied the system's protocols. Everything was automated. The transport would arrive, the prisoners would be loaded according to the manifest, and it would depart. No one actually checked if the right prisoners were on board. Why would they? The system was perfect, except it wasn't. Marcus had found dozens of small errors in various systems since he'd arrived. The Carethians were so confident in their technology that they never considered it might fail, or that someone might make it fail. Marcus made a small change, just a tiny alteration in the manifest. Prisoner 37 was now assigned to the textile factories instead of the depths. The textile factories were still prison labor, but they were on the surface. The work was hard but survivable. Most prisoners even earned early release through good behavior. He saved the change and held his breath. If the system detected the alteration, alarms would sound. Security would come for him. Nothing happened. Marcus deleted his access logs and went back to his regular duties. His hands shook as he worked on a mining drone's navigation system. he'd just committed a serious crime. Interfering with the justice system carried a minimum sentence of 5 years in the depths. 3 hours later, he watched from a window as the transport to the depths departed. He couldn't see who was on board, but he prayed his change had worked. There was no way to know for sure. He couldn't risk accessing the system again so soon. Days passed. Marcus went through his routine, but his mind was elsewhere. Had Zara made it to the textile factories? Had someone discovered his tampering? Every time a guard passed him in the corridors, his heart raced. A week later, Marcus was eating lunch in the human cafeteria when David sat down across from him. "You look terrible," David said. "Still thinking about that lizard girl?" Marcus pushed his food around his plate. Her name was Zara. Was, past tense. The transport to the depths left a week ago. David was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, man. I know it's hard to watch, but you can't save everyone. Especially not here." Marcus nodded, but inside he was screaming. He had saved her. At least he hoped he had. But he couldn't tell anyone, not even David. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone would be. Weeks turned into a month. Marcus threw himself into his work, trying not to think about Zara or what he'd done. The Carethians seemed to have no idea their perfect system had been compromised. Life went on as normal. Then one day, Marcus was called to repair equipment at the textile factories. His supervisor gave him the work order without comment, but Marcus's pulse quickened. This was where Zara should be if his plan had worked. The textile factories were a series of massive buildings on the industrial side of the city. The conditions were harsh: long hours, repetitive work, minimal breaks. But it was paradise compared to the depths. The workers here had beds, regular meals, and even a small commissary where they could spend the credits they earned. Marcus reported to the factory supervisor, a bored-looking Carethian who directed him to the broken equipment. It was a large automated loom that had jammed. As he worked, Marcus scanned the factory floor. Hundreds of workers in gray jumpsuits operated the machines. Most kept their heads down, focused on their quotas. Then he saw her. Zara was working at a station near the back, her hands moving quickly as she fed material into a machine. She looked thin but alive. Her scales had regained some of their color. Marcus forced himself to look away. He couldn't acknowledge her, couldn't give any sign that he knew her. If anyone suspected, he fixed the loom and left without looking back. But for the first time in weeks, he slept soundly. Over the following months, Marcus found excuses to return to the textile factories. Equipment there always seemed to need repair, and he was one of the best technicians. He never spoke to Zara, never made eye contact, but he kept track of her progress. She was a good worker. Her quotas were always met, sometimes exceeded. In the Carethian system, that meant everything. Good workers earned privileges, extra food, better quarters, even the possibility of early release. Marcus learned to hack other parts of the system, small things. A work assignment here, a quota adjustment there. Nothing that would draw attention, but enough to help. He made sure Zara's station always had the best materials to work with. He adjusted the quota algorithms to be slightly more favorable to her section. He wasn't just helping Zara. Once he understood how the system worked, he couldn't help but see all its flaws, all the places where a small change could mean the difference between survival and death for someone. He helped where he could, always careful, always subtle. 6 months after Zara's trial, Marcus was working late in the mining facility when an alert flashed on his screen. Someone was accessing his old back door into the transport system. His blood ran cold. He traced the access. It was coming from a terminal in the records hall. Someone was looking at the transport manifest from the day Zara was supposed to go to the depths. Marcus's mind raced. He could delete the logs, but that would be suspicious. He could alter them, but that might leave traces. Or he could do nothing and hope whoever was looking wouldn't notice the discrepancy. He chose option 4. He created a system error that would crash the records hall terminal. It would look like a random glitch, the kind that happened occasionally in any complex system. The investigator would lose their data and have to start over. The next day, Marcus waited for security to come for him. They didn't. The records hall reported a system malfunction that had corrupted several files. It was called in to fix it. The investigation, whatever it was, seemed to have stalled. But Marcus knew he was living on borrowed time. Someone was looking into that transport. Eventually, they would find what he'd done. He needed a plan. He started by creating more backdoors into the system. If he was caught, others could use them to help prisoners. He documented everything in coded files, hidden where only someone with his specific knowledge would find them. He also began preparing an escape route, not just for himself, but for Zara. She didn't know it, but her sentence had been commuted in the system from 20 years to 2. Another bit of hacking, another risk taken. In 18 months, she would be free, if they both lived that long. Marcus had always known that helping Zara was dangerous, but as he watched the investigation slowly progress, as he saw more and more prisoners condemned for minor infractions, he realized he couldn't stop. This wasn't just about one person anymore. It was about fighting a system that valued credits over lives. He thought about Earth history, about the people who had hidden refugees, who had forged documents, who had risked everything to save strangers. They hadn't been heroes. They'd been ordinary people who couldn't stand by and watch injustice. Marcus wasn't a hero either. He was just a technician who knew how to fix broken systems, and the Carethian justice system was the most broken thing he'd ever seen. As he worked late into the night, creating more safeguards, more ways to help, Marcus smiled grimly. The Carethians thought their system was perfect, untouchable. They were about to learn what humans had known for centuries. No system was perfect. And where there was injustice, there would always be someone willing to fight it, even if it was just one credit at a time. Inspector Korvax had been investigating irregularities in the prison transport system for 3 weeks. The Carethian's narrow face showed no emotion as he reviewed data streams in his office, but internally he was troubled. Patterns were emerging that suggested someone had been tampering with prisoner assignments. The case had started simply enough. A routine audit showed a discrepancy in mineral production from the depths. They were short exactly 1 prisoner's worth of output from 6 months ago. One prisoner who should have been there wasn't. Korvax's 4 hands worked across multiple screens, cross-referencing transport logs with prison populations. The system showed everything was correct, but the numbers didn't add up. Someone had been very clever. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen continued his double life. By day, he was just another human technician. By night, he was building something unprecedented on Careth Prime, an underground railroad for unjustly condemned prisoners. He wasn't alone anymore. 3 other humans had noticed his work and approached him carefully. There was Sarah, a systems analyst who had seen too many death sentences over trivial debts. James, a medical technician who treated injured prisoners and couldn't stand watching them sent back to die. And Lynn, a supply clerk who had access to resources they desperately needed. They met in secret, in a maintenance room deep in the human quarter where surveillance was spotty. The Carethians didn't monitor humans closely. They considered them beneath real concern. "I've identified 12 more cases this month," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A mother of 3, condemned to the depths over 5 credits. A teacher who missed a payment while sick. An artist who couldn't sell enough work to cover his housing tax." "Can we alter all their assignments?" James asked. Marcus shook his head. "Too many changes at once will trigger alarms. We have to be selective. Choose the ones who won't survive the depths." It was a horrible decision to make, choosing who to save and who to let go. But it was better than saving no one. Lynn pulled out a data pad. "I've been tracking the investigation. Inspector Korvax is getting close. He's requested access to the deep archive logs." Those will show the original transport manifest, Sarah said, her face pale, before Marcus changed it. Not if the archives suffer an unfortunate data corruption, Marcus said. But we can't keep playing defense. We need a long-term solution. They all knew what he meant. They couldn't keep hacking the system forever. Eventually, they'd be caught. They needed to either stop, abandoning countless people to die, or find a way to change the system itself. At the textile factory, Zara had no idea she was at the center of a growing resistance movement. She worked her shifts, kept her head down, and tried not to think about how close she'd come to the depths. She'd made a friend, another prisoner named Taylor who worked the station next to hers. Taylor had been there for 3 years, condemned over a debt of 50 credits when her business failed. "You're lucky," Taylor said one day during their brief meal break. "The depths transport you were supposed to be on, they lost 15 prisoners in a cave-in last month." Zara's scales went cold. She should have been on that transport. She should be dead. Instead, through some miracle or glitch, she was here. She didn't question it. On Careth Prime, you didn't question good fortune. But she did wonder sometimes. The human technician who came to fix the machines. She remembered him from the courtroom. He'd spoken up for her, tried to defend her. Sometimes she caught him glancing in her direction, though he never acknowledged her directly. There were rumors among the prisoners, stories of sentences mysteriously reduced, of work assignments changed at the last minute, of quotas that suddenly became achievable. The guards said it was just the system auto-correcting, but the prisoners whispered of a guardian spirit in the machines. Korvax was not a believer in spirits. He believed in data, in patterns, in the infallibility of proper investigation. And the data was telling him something disturbing. The system changes weren't random. They followed a pattern, always benefiting prisoners sentenced for minor debts, always just subtle enough to avoid automatic detection. He pulled up employment records for the facilities where changes had occurred. One name appeared repeatedly: Marcus Chen, human technician, security clearance level 7. The human had access to the systems that had been altered and the technical knowledge to do it. But knowing and proving were different things. The Carethian justice system required absolute proof. Korvax needed to catch the human in the act. He began monitoring Marcus's access logs in real time. He set up tracking algorithms to alert him to any system changes that matched the pattern. He was patient. The law was patient. Marcus felt the net closing. His instincts, honed by years of working in hostile environments, told him he was being watched. He started varying his patterns, using different terminals, different times. But he couldn't stop. 3 more prisoners were scheduled for the depths this week. One was only 16 cycles old, barely an adult by Carethian standards. The breaking point came when Sarah burst into their secret meeting with tears in her eyes. "They've accelerated the execution schedule in the depths," she said. "Prisoners who can't meet the new quotas are being terminated for inefficiency. 43 died yesterday." 43 people murdered over productivity metrics, James spat. "We have to do something bigger," Lynn said. "The hack and hope approach isn't enough anymore." Marcus had been thinking the same thing. They'd saved maybe 100 prisoners over the past months, but thousands more had died. The system itself was the problem. "What if we exposed it?" he said slowly. "Not to the Carethians. They see nothing wrong with their system. But to the galactic community, to the trade consortiums, to everyone who does business with Careth Prime." "The Carethians would never allow negative information to leave the planet," Sarah pointed out. "They wouldn't have a choice if their entire data network went down, and the only way to get it back was through off-world technicians," Marcus said. It was audacious. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of plan that humans were known for throughout the galaxy. When pushed to the wall, they didn't just fight back, they flipped the entire board. But first, Marcus had one more rescue to complete. Zara's adjusted sentence was almost up. In 2 weeks, she would be free. He just had to make sure nothing went wrong before then. Inspector Korvax made his move on a cold morning when the city was shrouded in fog. He had documented 17 instances of system tampering, all traceable to terminals Marcus Chen had accessed. It was enough for an arrest warrant. He brought a squad of enforcement officers to the human quarter. The humans they passed looked nervous but unsurprised. Word traveled fast in their small community. They found Marcus's quarters empty. His belongings were gone, his work terminal wiped clean. Korvax felt a rare emotion, frustration. The human had known he was coming. "Search everything," he ordered. "Find where he's gone." But Marcus hadn't run. He was in the textile factory, making one last change to the system. Zara's release was scheduled for next week, but something felt wrong. The investigation was too close, the timing too dangerous. He moved her release to today, in 1 hour. As he worked, alarms began to sound. His unauthorized access had been detected. Security would be here in minutes. Marcus finished the change and turned to find Zara standing behind him. She'd been moved to a maintenance detail and had seen him working. "It was you," she said quietly. "You saved me from the depths." "You saved yourself by surviving," Marcus said. "But right now, we need to go. You're being released in 58 minutes, and we need to make sure you're at the right gate when it happens." "Why?" Zara asked. "Why risk everything for strangers?" Marcus thought about it as they moved through the factory. "Because on Earth we learned something important. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Your system is broken, Zara, and someone has to fix it." They reached the release processing area just as Marcus's communicator buzzed. It was Lynn. "They're here." Lynn's voice was tense. "Korvax and a full enforcement squad. They're tearing apart your quarters." "Let them," Marcus said. "Is everyone in position?" "Sarah's ready at the network hub. James has the medical data compiled. We're just waiting for your signal." Marcus turned to Zara. "In 40 minutes, you'll be free. When you are, I need you to do something for me." He handed her a data chip. "This contains evidence of everything. Every person condemned to die over trivial debts. Every life lost to the quotas. Every injustice the system has committed. Take it to the human embassy. They'll know what to do with it." "What about you?" Zara asked. "I'll be fine," Marcus lied. "Just remember, you weren't saved by chance. You were saved because every life has value, no matter what the ledgers say." The release klaxon sounded. Zara's energy shackles deactivated. She was free. As she walked through the gates, Marcus sent a single message to his team. "Light it up." Across Kareth Prime, the carefully planned operation began. Sarah activated a virus that would cripple the planetary data network, but only after transmitting terabytes of evidence to every major news outlet in the galaxy. James released medical records showing the true cost of the prison system in lives lost. Lynn ensured supply shipments were rerouted to feed prisoners instead of profit margins. And Marcus? He walked out of the textile factory to find Inspector Korvax waiting for him. "Marcus Chen," Korvax said, his voice formal. "You are under arrest for systematic tampering with state justice protocols." "I know," Marcus said, holding out his hands for the energy shackles. "I've been expecting you." As they led him away, Marcus saw Zara in the distance, running toward the human embassy with the data chip. He smiled. The Carethians thought they were arresting one rogue technician. They had no idea they'd just triggered something much bigger. The human embassy received Zara 20 minutes later. Ambassador Williams, a veteran diplomat who'd seen too many alien justice systems, listened to her story and reviewed the data chip. Her face went hard. "How many?" she asked her aide after reviewing the files. "Thousands dead in the depths over minor debts. Hundreds of thousands more in forced labor. The youngest was 12 cycles old. condemned over a food credit their parents couldn't pay. Williams stood up. Contact Earth Central Command, request a full humanitarian intervention team, and get me the Galactic Trade Consortium on priority channel. Ma'am, the Carithians claim sovereignty over their justice system. The Carithians, Williams said coldly, are about to learn that some things transcend sovereignty. Genocide by debt is still genocide. Back in his cell, Marcus could hear the chaos beginning outside. Data networks were crashing. Communication systems were failing. The perfect Carithian system was experiencing something it had never faced before: total rebellion. Korvac stood outside his cell, studying the human with those compound eyes. "You planned this," Korvac said. It wasn't a question. "I fixed broken machines for a living," Marcus replied. "Your justice system was just another broken machine. The difference is this one was killing people. The law is absolute. Order must be maintained." "Whose order?" Marcus asked. "The order that sends children to die in the depths? The order that values a credit more than a life? That's not order, Inspector. That's systematic murder with extra paperwork." Korvac was quiet for a moment. "You know you'll be sentenced to the depths for this." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But here's the thing about humans, Inspector. We're really good at surviving, and we're even better at making sure others survive with us." Outside, the first ships from the Galactic Trade Consortium were arriving, responding to the humanitarian crisis alert. The Carithian government was scrambling to explain why their prison system had a higher death rate than most wars. And in a small apartment in the free sector, Zara held a communication device, spreading the word to everyone who would listen. The guardian spirit in the machines had a name, had a face, had shown her that one person could stand against an entire system. The revolution had begun with one credit, one life saved, one human who said no more. It would end with the complete reformation of Carithian society. But that's a story for another day. For now, it was enough that Marcus Chen sat in his cell, listening to the sound of a broken system finally beginning to crack. The Galactic Trade Consortium's intervention team arrived on Kareth Prime like a storm. 300 investigators, medical personnel, and human rights advocates descended on the planet, armed with something more powerful than any weapon: documentation of systemic atrocities that Marcus and his team had revealed to the galaxy. Ambassador Williams led the charge, flanked by representatives from 17 different species. They marched into the High Council chambers, where Kareth Prime's leaders sat in emergency session. "You will cease all prisoner executions immediately," Williams announced. "You will open all detention facilities for inspection, and you will explain to the galaxy how your society came to value currency over conscience." The High Counselor, an ancient Carithian whose scales had faded to near white, spoke with cold authority. "You have no jurisdiction here, human. Our laws are our own." "Your laws," Williams replied, "violate 17 different galactic treaties on sentient rights. Your trade agreements with the consortium are hereby suspended pending full investigation. Your credit-based economy, which you prize so highly, is about to become worthless." The economic threat was devastating. Kareth Prime depended on off-world trade for essential resources. Without access to galactic markets, their perfect system would collapse within months. In his cell, Marcus watched the news feeds on a small screen that James had managed to smuggle to him. The other human resistance members had been arrested too, but they were being held in the regular detention center, not sentenced to the depths, yet. The guard who brought his meals was young, his scales still bright green. He lingered one day, watching the news coverage with Marcus. "Is it true?" the guard asked quietly. "What they're saying about the depths? About the children sent there?" "Every word," Marcus said. "Your own systems recorded it all. We just made sure people saw the records." The guard's tail twitched, a sign of distress in Carithians. My clutch brother was sent to the depths 5 years ago. 30 credits debt from medical bills. We were told he died in an accident." "Maybe he did," Marcus said gently. "Or maybe he died because he couldn't meet an impossible quota while breathing toxic air." "I'm sorry." The guard left quickly, but Marcus could see the doubt spreading. That was how change happened. One person at a time, questioning what they'd always accepted. Zara had become something she never expected, a symbol. The freed prisoner who exposed the system, the life saved by human defiance. Media from across the galaxy wanted her story. She told it again and again, always emphasizing that thousands more remained trapped. She stood before the consortium investigators, her golden eyes bright with determination. "I was condemned to die for 1 credit. 1. Less than the cost of the energy used to process my sentence. How many others died for such meaningless amounts?" The investigation revealed numbers that shocked even the hardened diplomats. Over the past century, more than 2 million prisoners had died in the depths. 60% had been sentenced for debts under 100 credits. The youngest had been 10 cycles old, but the Carithian government remained defiant. They scheduled Marcus's trial for the following week, charging him with sabotage, undermining state authority, and causing economic damage in the millions of credits. Sarah managed to get a message to him through their hidden network. "We're working on something. Don't give up hope." Marcus hadn't given up hope. He'd accomplished what he set out to do: save Zara, expose the system, and light a fire that couldn't be extinguished. If he died in the depths for it, at least he'd die knowing he'd made a difference. The trial began on a day when protests filled the streets of Careth Prime's capital. Not just humans, but Carethians too. The guard who'd spoken to Marcus was there, along with hundreds of others who'd lost family to the depths. Judge Vex presided again, his forearms folded in the same position as when he'd sentenced Zara. But something was different. The courtroom was packed with observers, consortium representatives, media from 50 worlds, and in the front row, Zara herself. "Marcus Chen," Judge Vex began, "you stand accused of crimes against the state. How do you plead?" Marcus stood tall. He'd prepared for this moment. "I plead guilty to everything except one charge. I didn't cause economic damage. I prevented murder. Every credit lost represents a life saved." The prosecutor, a sharp-minded Carethian named Orcs, began presenting evidence: the system breaches, the falsified records, the coordinated attack on the data networks. It was comprehensive and damning. But when it came time for the defense, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Williams stood up. "I invoke Galactic Charter Article 15, she announced. "The right of intervention when local laws violate universal sentient rights." Judge Vex's scales darkened. "That article has never been invoked in a criminal trial." "It's never been needed before," Williams replied. "Marcus Chen is hereby claimed as a protected witness in the consortium's investigation into crimes against sentience on Careth Prime. Any sentence passed on him will be considered an act of silencing a witness." The courtroom erupted. This wasn't just about one human anymore. This was about the fundamental conflict between Careth Prime's sovereignty and the galaxy's moral standards. The High Council called an emergency recess. For 3 days, Careth Prime's leaders debated behind closed doors, while protests grew larger and trade ships remained grounded at the spaceports. During those 3 days, something remarkable happened in the depths. The prisoners, learning about the events above, began their own resistance. They refused to work. They shared their meager rations to keep the weakest alive. They scratched their stories into the walls: names, ages, debts owed, lives lost. The guards couldn't force them all back to work. The system that relied on fear and isolation crumbled when people stood together. Inspector Korvax visited Marcus on the second night of the recess. He looked tired, his usually perfect uniform rumpled. I've been reviewing your files, Korvax said. Every change you made, every life you redirected from the depths. Finding more evidence against me? Marcus asked. Finding patterns, Korvax corrected. You didn't save randomly. You saved those with the smallest debts first, those with families, those whose skills could help others. You were logical. I was human, Marcus said. We have a saying on Earth, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But we also believe that the few matter. Every individual matters. Korvax was quiet for a long moment. My report to the High Council is due tomorrow. I'm supposed to recommend the harshest sentence possible. And will you? I've spent my entire career enforcing the law without question. Order above all. Korvax's compound eyes focused on Marcus. But what is order if it's built on corpses? What is law if it serves only ledgers and not lives? He left without another word, but Marcus saw something in the inspector's posture, the weight of someone carrying a terrible decision. The next morning, the High Council reconvened. Judge Vex looked even more ancient as he prepared to deliver the verdict. But before he could speak, Inspector Korvax stood. I request permission to address the court, Korvax said. It was unusual but not unprecedented. Judge Vex nodded. Korvax walked to the center of the courtroom. I have served the law of Kareth Prime for 50 years. I have never questioned, never doubted, never hesitated. Order was everything. He paused. I was wrong. Gasps rippled through the Carethian section of the audience. The human Marcus Chen broke our laws. This is undeniable, but our laws are broken. I've documented over 1 million cases where our justice system chose profit over mercy, efficiency over empathy. We have created a machine that consumes our own people. He turned to face the High Council. I recommend all charges against Marcus Chen be dropped. I further recommend immediate reform of our entire justice system. And I submit my resignation as Chief Inspector, as I can no longer serve laws I do not believe in. The courtroom exploded into chaos. A Carethian inspector, the embodiment of their system, had just denounced everything they stood for. Judge Vex called for order, but his voice lacked its usual authority. The foundation of their society was cracking, and everyone could feel it. That night, the High Council made a historic decision. Faced with economic collapse, internal rebellion, and galactic condemnation, they chose survival over pride. All prisoners in the depths would be immediately evacuated and reviewed for release. The credit debt sentencing system would be suspended pending reform. And Marcus Chen would be released to assist in designing a new justice system based on rehabilitation, not retribution. The announcement triggered celebrations in the streets. Families who had given up hope rushed to the prison exits, waiting for loved ones they'd thought were dead. Medical teams rushed into the depths to treat prisoners who had survived years in conditions that should have killed them. Marcus was released that evening. Sarah, James, and Lynn were waiting for him outside the detention center, along with someone else, Zara. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for saving me, for saving all of us. I didn't save anyone, Marcus said, looking at the crowds of reunited families. I just fixed a broken system. You all did the saving, by surviving, by hoping, by fighting back. Ambassador Williams approached, a slight smile on her stern face. The consortium wants to offer you a position, traveling to worlds with similar problems, helping reform their justice systems. Marcus considered it. He could leave Kareth Prime, move on to the next challenge. But then he looked at the work still to be done here. Maybe later, he said. Right now, I think I'm needed here. Someone has to help Inspector Korvax design a system that actually works. Over the following months, Kareth Prime underwent a transformation that sociologists would study for generations. The credit-based justice system was dismantled. Restorative justice programs were implemented. The depths were sealed forever, But not before every story scratched on those walls was documented. Zara became an advocate for prisoner rights, using her experience to help others navigate their trauma. She worked with Marcus and Korvax on the new justice reforms, ensuring the voices of survivors were heard. The economic impact was severe at first. Without prisoner labor, many industries struggled. But something interesting happened. Carethians began to value work differently when it wasn't associated with punishment. Innovation increased. Productivity improved when workers were paid fairly instead of forced. A year after his trial, Marcus stood at the memorial they'd built at the entrance to the sealed depths. 2 million names were inscribed on black stone walls. At the center was a simple inscription, "For those who died for credits, remembered by those who lived for change." Korvax stood beside him, no longer in inspector's uniform, but in the simple robes of a justice reform advocate. "Do you regret it?" Korvax asked. "Breaking our laws? Destroying our system?" "I regret not doing it sooner," Marcus replied. "How many of these names could have been saved if someone had acted earlier?" "Perhaps none," Korvax said. "It took an outsider to see what we had made ourselves blind to. It took a human to remind us that we were more than our credits." They were joined by others: Sarah, James, Lynn, Zara, and dozens of former prisoners and guards who had become part of the reform movement. They stood in silence, remembering the dead while working for the living. The transformation of Careth Prime became a case study across the galaxy, how one human, driven by conscience rather than law, had sparked a revolution that saved millions. How a system that seemed unbreakable had shattered when people simply refused to accept injustice. But for Marcus, it was simpler than that. He'd seen someone about to die for one credit, and he'd said no. Everything else had followed from that simple act of defiance. As they left the memorial, Zara asked him, "What now? The galaxy is full of broken systems." Marcus smiled. "Then I guess we'd better get to work fixing them. One credit, one life, one system at a time." The sons of Careth Prime set behind them, casting long shadows from the memorial. But for the first time in generations, those shadows didn't hide suffering. They simply marked the end of one day and the promise of a better tomorrow. In the years that followed, "Remember the one credit" became a rallying cry across the galaxy. When faced with injustice, when laws valued property over people, when systems chose order over compassion, someone would always stand up and say those words. And they would remember Marcus Chen, the human technician who looked at a broken system and decided to fix it. Not with violence, not with grand speeches, but with careful work, patient planning, and an unshakable belief that every life mattered. That's what humans brought to the galaxy. Not superior technology or military might, but something far more dangerous to tyrants and broken systems everywhere: the simple conviction that things could be better, and the stubborn determination to make them so. One credit had condemned her to the mines, one human had defied their system, and in the end, that defiance had saved not just one life, but millions. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity that day. When pushed to choose between law and justice, humans would choose justice. When forced to decide between order and compassion, humans would choose compassion. And when faced with a system that ground people into dust for profit, humans would break that system without hesitation. That's why, across 1,000 worlds, the phrase became both a warning and a promise. Never tell a human that a life is worth less than a credit. They take that personally. And somewhere in the galaxy, Marcus Chen continued his work, fixing broken systems one world at a time. Because that's what humans did. They fixed things, even if it meant breaking a few laws along the way.